Hello, everyone. Racial justice, a complex question, a complex issue, a global issue. I remember vividly last year, a good friend of mine from Austria called me up around 7 o'clock in the evening. It was at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. We spent an hour on the phone. She said she wanted to understand more about it, and more importantly, how I felt as a black person in a white world. She's traveled a lot, speaks perfect English, understands all the different nuances. But you know what? She's the only person in my entire friendship world, if you like, who has called specifically or wanted to engage in a conversation around Black Lives Matter. Now, that's not a judgment, that's just an observation. Because you see, also, I've attended many trade shows in my industry, in the retail real estate sector. And I remember one day, not that many years ago, someone came up to me who's been a friend of mine for a long time. And he said, "You know what, Chris? Someone just reminded me today that you were black." This is well before Black Lives Matter, so this is a long time ago. But the fact that this person who's known me for many, many years suddenly realized or was made aware of the fact that I'm black was interesting. Like I said, what I'm sharing is not about judgment, it's just about where people are coming from. And so my Austrian friend anyway, she calls me her exotic friend. She coined that phrase about 10 years ago when we first met. She said it's a combination of my being Nigerian, African, and having traveled a lot and seen many things in life. And for me, or for her, that became an exotic friendship. Now, my background is born and raised in Nigeria, one of 4 children. My parents were from a middle-class background, I guess you could say, in Nigeria. My father was a Methodist minister, and my mother a teacher and a headmistress at a school. Both very well qualified. My father went to Cambridge. My mother trained at Southlands College, which is a well-known, I'm not sure if it still exists, teacher training college in London. So the best of the best, and brought that back to Nigeria. Now, when they were bringing us up, 4 children, one thing they said very clearly is, you must not carry the fact that you are black on your shoulders. It is not your responsibility to have the entire black world on your shoulders. You will have to be the best you can be and do the best you can in all circumstances. We were young, but it still resonated and still resonates today. They also said 2 very fundamental important things for us as children. Despite some financial challenges, they said they would always provide food on the table, and they would do their very best to provide us with the best education possible. My sister went on to become a doctor. We all went to university. She became a doctor. I became a civil engineer. One brother became a lawyer, and the other brother became an accountant. So they certainly fulfilled their love and indeed their mandate to their children. And for that, we are very grateful. I say that as a backdrop, not to impress, but I say it because despite one's education, in our case, in my case, it doesn't mean that the world or those you meet are around see you in a different light. It's a complex conversation. So I'm going to run through a few stories in my life. Some are funny, some are not so funny. You can take them as you wish and as you feel, and take them into your heart, and maybe they'll inspire something in you. If that's the case, then I've certainly achieved something. So I'm grateful for that. One of the most beautiful stories for me was a long time ago when we were engaged, my wife Pamela and I, or my wife-to-be at that case. And she had a granny that she loved dearly. Now, when she told Granny that she was engaged to me as a black guy, Granny asked the question, does he dress like Tarzan? Now, shocking, yes, but that was her reality. A very privileged background, traveled to the best places in the world, loved golf, so played on the best golf courses. For her, she had an image of black people. Now, Pamela, being very smart as she was and still is, asked Granny to lay on an afternoon tea, which we had. We went over to her place, we had afternoon tea, and Pamela, again, very astutely sat me next to Granny. We had a great conversation, great afternoon. And as we left, I wasn't there, but she whispered to Pamela saying, he's actually a very lovely young man. If you closed your eyes and spoke to him, you wouldn't know he was black. Again, you may be shocked. I just thought it was wonderful. Pamela loved Granny. I'd got to know her very briefly, a wonderful lady. And for me, that was a fantastic experience. So some of those are wonderful memories. Some are amusing, as when we went, Pamela and I, to see her sister who ran a restaurant in Troon on the west coast of Scotland. For those of you who play golf, great world golfing location. Walked into the restaurant, and literally, as you can imagine, for those who loved or watched Westerns, the doors opened. We walked in, and there was a deathly silence, total silence. Everybody stopped. They had never seen a black person. We didn't stay very long because Pamela felt very uncomfortable. Again, I'm black, so I live this, so it didn't matter much to me. But she couldn't take it. And so after a few minutes, I think we had tea or coffee very quickly, but we didn't stay long. We saw my future sister-in-law, and then we left because it was just unbearable to be seen in that way and to have people behave like that. Now, as you can imagine, most of the run-ins one has being black is, and this is not a TV thing, this is real life, the police. And the second area might be the administrative encounters one has in different countries. So I guess one of the most revealing police encounters was a few years ago, many years ago now, because the kids were younger. I was driving in my brand new BMW M5, fast, cool, very nice, love the car, kids love the car. And we were traveling to Strasbourg to see some friends. And we got stopped by the police as we were leaving the Périphérique, heading on to the motorway. The police, 4 of them, each side of the car, stood out, stopped me, asked for papers, gave them the papers. 4 kids in the back, enjoying a McDonald's. You would imagine that common sense would say, and a white wife as well, by the way, common sense would kind of say, maybe this is not a whatever image they have of me. Anyway, showed them the papers, and they checked the carte grise, asked me to open the bonnet so they could check the reference number on the carte grise against the car, make sure, I guess, it wasn't stolen, opened the boot, and goodness knows what else. It was not a pleasant experience. Not something you'd wish to have in different cases, but it's what it was. Another short example was in Paris, got stopped. Also had the M5 I was driving, 2 policemen, one a man, one a woman. The young woman was obviously on a mission as far as she was concerned. She had some bugbear. So the questions she asked me, which were totally ludicrous, it wasn't a speed trap, I hadn't run a red light, routine control, that's totally okay, I can live with that. But then she looked at me and she said, I bet you don't have many points left on your license. Now, for me, that's an inane statement to make. I wasn't caught in a speed trap. I wasn't speeding, etc., etc. But she just had this image, I guess, fast car, black guy, must be delinquent. Anyway, I very calmly, but with a wry smile, I have to admit, said to her, you'd be surprised. I didn't tell her what it was. Anyway, she checked, and I had 9 points out of 12. And I've always had 9 points out of 12, despite driving a very fast car. They're just things I do which are within the law. So that was one example. The other one, because it's not to do with just France, again, the police is in the Netherlands, where we used to live, Pamela and I. And coming back one evening, I have to admit, I was as cool as they come. I had my leather jacket, I had my beautiful, classy trousers, my cowboy boots. Yes, cowboy boots. Used to wear those back in the day. Really cool. Driving a BMW as well, the 528i, which had just come out, and I'd negotiated that with my new company. So driving back one late night, skidded on black ice. If you know the Netherlands, the houses are quite close to the road. So as I skidded, I hit another car, which is a Mercedes, in a man's driveway. BMW meets Mercedes. I didn't have too much damage, but the Mercedes was pretty wrecked, so I guess BMW wins. Anyway, the owner of the house called the police. They came out. Like I said, leather jacket, looking the part, all, dressed to kill, really. They asked Pamela to go home on her own. They didn't even accompany her home, and they took me to a police station. And I spent the night in the police station. They obviously felt they had found a drug runner, because the Netherlands has a certain connotation. Whatever it was they had in their mind. So I was put in the back of the police car, driven away like a criminal to the station, held there, and released the following day because I had my residency permit, I was legitimate and whatever. Maybe they were trying to set an example, I don't know. So that's another experience of the police and the joys of meeting with the law. But as I said, there's the administrative side as well. And those of you who have seen or been to, when you're getting a residency permit, when you're looking for, your carte de séjour, you're going for a driving license or anything else administrative-wise, you're not exactly, as a black community or non-French, in this case, community, there are preconceived ideas. So living in Strasbourg, I had to renew my residency permit. And the guy on the other side of the counter looked at me. It's as vivid today as it was then, because it was such brutality. And he just looked at me and he said, "We don't give residency permits to people like you." I mean, think about it. People like you. It's not like to black people or to Nigerians or whatever. It's just people like you. So you felt not even third rate or third grade or whatever. You just didn't feel, you were dehumanized. I was so angry. My blood went from 0 to 100 and whatever Fahrenheit, I guess, very quickly. I was just at boiling point. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I was about to leap over the counter, and Pamela, with her wisdom, grabbed my hand because she knew that I was going to lose it. And I walked off, came back a few days later, met somebody else, and it worked out okay. But it was not a fun experience at all. So something that I wouldn't want anybody else to go through by any stretch of the imagination. There are some situations, however, that kind of are fun, if you like, amusing. And I'll give you a couple of stories to make it a little bit lighter. One is when I was in Austria, 5-star hotel, beautifully dressed, waiting for someone to pick me up and take me to lunch. And somebody rolled up in fancy car, came up to the door because I was standing by the door, handed me his keys and asked me if I could park his car. I was so shocked. I didn't know what to say. I just could not believe what had happened. One of those, nanosecond moments you sort of think, wow, but he wanted me to park his car. Clearly saw me as a certain level in life and felt that's what I should do. But I simply said to him, I'm not the valet. And no apology, no nothing. He just walked off, took his keys back, and that was it. I've had run-ins with customs, passport control, US, Europe, Middle East as well. But one of my more interesting ones, I would say, is when I went to Australia and I was taken aside, customs check, and they literally, it wasn't a strip search, but they searched all my belongings, everything. I wasn't going to be there for very long, but nonetheless, they gave me the full rundown. Now, what I like about this particular incident, as difficult as it was, when you arrive at, I think, 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, all you want to do is get to the hotel, freshen up, what was it, a 20-hour flight, Paris to Singapore, Singapore to Brisbane. All you want to do is just get to the hotel and get set up. But they went through slowly and methodically. And in the end, they actually discovered traces of drugs. And I was intrigued. They obviously grilled me, do you do drugs? Where have you traveled to recently? So on and so forth. So not exactly pleasant, but methodical. And in the end, because they checked my credit cards, they checked my did a test on the credit cards, on my keys, on anything I had in my pocket, etc. And it came back positive for what turned out to be cocaine. And then they explained to me and I said, how do you know it's cocaine? And they explained to me how they knew it was cocaine. They knew where it came from and all the rest of it. I was fascinated. I thought, wow, you guys know all this stuff. They said, oh yeah, you'd be surprised what comes through and what we know and what we're trained to do and what we can check out. Anyway, that was a lovely, at least educational moment, even though it started off a little bit rough initially and wasn't particularly fantastic. My final example, coming back to where I started about being educated, was working for a major global company, and we were pitching for an American brand's business in the retail sector. So there were about 10 of us in this meeting, 6 from my team, my group, my company, and 4 from this brand. And these are senior executives, senior vice president, senior guys from this company. And in the whole meeting, inevitably, I was the only black guy. And I was a senior individual as well. But the representatives of that brand always talked down to me. Whenever I spoke about something, they would kind of, almost like say, be quiet, don't talk, only speak when you're spoken to, or we're not interested in what you have to say. So it wasn't exactly an easy experience. And my colleagues were shocked, both in the meeting. I could read everybody's face. They were shocked and apologized afterwards, saying that it was unacceptable to be treated like that. Now, we didn't get the business. And quite frankly, even to this day, I've always said that I would never, ever work for that brand. And it's not Gap, who I loved and worked for a long time. But the attitude was just unacceptable. Now, the irony is, they've recently closed their flagship store on the Champs-Élysées, for example, and will be closing other stores in Europe over the next few months, which kind of reminds me of, in the Bible, Romans and in Deuteronomy, where it says, the Lord says, vengeance is mine. Now, if you know me, I don't have a vengeful bone in my body in any way, shape or form. But there is a part that is comforting around that, where you just know that God will deal with those that need to be dealt with in his own way and in his own time, and whatever that might be. So I don't necessarily see the vengeance as being, maybe the fire and brimstone God. It could be, and that's his right, of course, as our protector. But I also see that as God will take care of us through the dialogue, through the conversations, through the discussions that we have, and how that plays out in our lives. So going from anonymity, as it were, in terms of how I've been dealt with as a black person, to very clear indications where people have their own preconceived ideas and perceptions. And all that to say, I would wrap up by simply saying, it's not an easy conversation. Nobody's got the right answer. But I think through conversation, dialogue, discussion, we can work through this, because this whole social justice, activism, Black Lives Matter and other groups are going to grow and increase, if not through our lives, but through our own children or grandchildren's lives as well. So it's here to stay. So that's a little bit of my story. I hope that it has, on the one hand, given you some insights, but equally will allow you to think maybe about those who you know. And this is not about black or white, by the way, this whole racial justice conversation. It's about all colors, all ethnicity, all backgrounds. It just needs to be addressed in a way in which it becomes relevant for each one of us, and we're moving forward what God's ultimate purpose is for us, which is to bring us together as one people. So thank you for listening, and let's continue the conversation.